One of the things that I love about Awaken Alive, and I just saw it. I don't know. You can speak for an entire generation, but
Perfect.
I don't know about you, but sometimes being an older person, being in the university setting where we're trying to help you grow up and trying to get you ready for professional, blah blah blah. As I'm watching you guys, it also just reminded me that being a young adult is also still about remembering that you're a kid. Is there some truth to that? Okay, 4 of you were like, yes, but the rest of you were walking around like dinosaurs and chickens. So I think I'm pretty right on that one.
You're saying you don't do that every day?
Not every day.
Some days?
I have a cat at home.
Explains it.
And so, yeah. Anyway, one of the other things that we love about doing Awaken Alive is trying to hear from your generation. This year we didn't do the panels the last couple of years. We might get to that the next time. But I love hearing and talking about some of the questions from your perspective. What is it that sometimes we need to hear? And again, we were joking off air that I'm not asking you to speak for an entire generation, but Aaron, this is Aaron Miller. Everybody, say hey to Aaron. Aaron is a huge help for me. I'll give you my perspective, and then you can introduce yourself. But Aaron, from my perspective, is a huge help from a church standpoint. He's become a very good friend. He leads our AV team on the traditional side of things. He helps out in our contemporary side. And so we've given him a lot of additional responsibility. And some of you who are in my professional growth breakout, he's done a lot of these things where he's earned the trust of a lot of an older generation. And so the influence that he has is pretty significant. And I think, Aaron, you're a good example of what happens when the older generation and the younger generation learn how to serve one another. So it's been a joy to serve with you. So that's my glowing recommendation for Aaron Miller. But why don't you tell everybody who you are, a little bit about yourself, and then I got a couple questions for you.
Sure. So, in addition to everything Mike said, help out at my church. St. Paul's down in Muskego. If you're looking for someone to go to church tomorrow, St. Paul's Muskego is a great option. But I graduated from Wisconsin Lutheran College in May of 22. So I've been out of college for about 18 months now. And it's kind of interesting trying to figure out your place. And I've landed in a whole lot of church work, I guess. In addition to that, my full-time job is a software developer. But, I try to make a little bit more of my life than just being a software developer. And that's just kind of been the emphasis that I've put on myself.
And you're a fan of Quick Trip.
I am a fan of Quick Trip. I'm trying to get you to go to Quick Trip more often.
That's right. And if it hadn't been snowing out, that's probably where I was going last night. So
I stopped at Quick Trip last night.
Of course
Their
you did.
parking lot was so clear. It was amazing.
There it was. And you guys went to McDonald's, before. So one of the questions that I think is that for us that are in the church, one of the things that we are wrestling with, and I've talked to a lot of people who love your generation, but are trying to figure out how to do this and what this means. But the idea of having a seat at the table. There's a lot of places where your generation is not necessarily represented from a church standpoint. And I'm curious, when you hear that phrase as a young person, and maybe this is something you guys can talk about at your dinner tables and whatnot, and then let us know in the comments for the conference comments. But what does it, Aaron, mean for you, do you think, as a young adult, to have a seat at the table? When you hear that phrase, what does it mean for you to have an effective seat at the table?
Yeah, I think there's 2 main points for that for me. First would be being okay with failing forward. I know that, at least at my church, we have an emphasis on mistakes happen, but you learn from them. And as you get more acclimated into where you're at, those mistakes will go down, as they do. But not being afraid to admit you made those mistakes. And just admit you're growing up. All of us 18 to 25-year-olds, 18-year-olds, you are a newborn adult. You are 0 years old in the adult world. 25-year-olds, you're still 7 years old. That is a child. You're still growing up. I am 22, 4 years old. Probably about 2 years into walking, maybe. Still stumbling a little bit.
Can you dress yourself at this point?
Some days.
Sometimes, sure.
If I didn't have to be here yesterday, I would not have dressed myself. But no, just knowing that you're a baby adult, and just like an actual baby has a lot of learning left to do, you still have a lot of learning left to do too. That was my first point. Second point, having a seat at the table means, I guess, knowing your role at the table. I heard a really good talk about a week ago now about the parable of the wineskins that Jesus told, that you don't put new wine into old wineskins. And I've heard it before, but I never really thought about it in this way until this talk. So the idea, in summary, I'll keep it short, but the idea was you don't put new wine into old wineskins because the new wine needs to ferment, and the old wineskins are just going to burst. You need the flexible wineskins, the new ones, to be able to put the new wine into. But that doesn't mean that the old wineskins are any worse. In fact, they're what the people drink out of. That's the wine you want. So keeping that idea, the old ideas, the older wineskins maybe, in my case in the church, they're still full of great ideas. They're the ones that got us to this point, and we shouldn't just go around replacing them with the new wine, because the new wine, no one wants to drink that yet. But in addition, the new wine still has to ferment. Mm-hmm. When you sit at the table, listen to the old wine at the table, you're giving yourself time to ferment. You're giving yourself time to know your thoughts, your ideas, and what you ultimately want to bring to the table. And while there's places in the church and in the world for young adults, it's also a time to grow, while also making the difference that you can, while still respecting the old wine that exists.
Amen to that. I mean, well said. I mean, we were together when we were listening to that one for the first time, and when the speaker just talked about that idea that the old wineskin, they showed us a picture of a new wineskin, which is pretty gross actually looking. It's a relatively new skin of an animal that is still flexible, and the old one is like nice and kind of pretty, and it's shrunk up, and it looks like it's formed like it's almost like a purse, if you will. And that point, that inside though is what matters, and that wine and that old wineskin is that's the fermented stuff, that's the good stuff. The stuff, if you were to pour it out from the new wineskin, would be grape juice. It hadn't even become wine yet. And what I love about that is, you talk about servant leadership, humble enough to learn, confident enough to lead. That is what has made you have more and more influence. When you say something, it is, for me as an older leader in the church, it has been affirming. I remember, can I tell the light story? Is that okay? So, traditional church, COVID, we had these really low-hanging lamps, and it basically would block the view of the balcony. We needed to open up seating. We took in a new idea for how we were going to light the church, and it was pretty different. Turns out it was actually, I was turning it back to the way that it once was before, but I remember that when we went through this, at first you had some questions.
Yeah, a whole lot of questions. I mean, it looked completely different. I walked in one weekend, I'm like, what you doing over here? It's looking more like contemporary service. Like, is this really what we're going for here? Yeah. And yeah, I came to you asking for a little bit of context. And yeah, looking back on it, I may have been a little quick to jump to conclusions for a lot of it. And yeah, that's a mistake I made, and something I think about fairly frequently. Like, hey, maybe I need more context before I make a decision here.
And I love that. So that moment was pretty big for the two of us, because from that moment, because of the way that you handled that, you asked for more content. You had said, I'm not sure that I like this or agree with it, and there's more to that story we won't go into, but you came and you asked, and then in the process, I had talked actually with a lot of the older members as well, to find out what was it like before, what was the purpose of the design of the building. And so when we put the lighting together and we gave the context, from there it was trying to accentuate. And because you were humble enough to ask me for that without just oh, right, here's somebody who's going to be a young person who's now going to be mad at me. You were able to see the bigger vision, and you could lean into it because we had it. That moment really earned a lot of credibility from me because of the humility and willingness to listen.
Yeah, and I appreciate your willingness to hear me out and my quickness to jump to conclusions because, if I was on your side, I probably would have gotten a little defensive. It's like, no, this is the decision I made. But, no, I think when it goes both ways, and you can earn that trust going both ways, especially across generations, that's when you're actually able to be effective when reaching multiple generations.
How does the church miss the mark when it comes to engaging your generation and giving your generation a seat at the table? If you've talked about that with other peers or just a general observation, how are we missing having you guys as a part of that?
Now I'm speaking for the generation again. I think a big part of it is, I'll go 2 parts again. First, not creating a culture that isn't okay with the mistakes. Kind of like I mentioned, being willing to fail forward. When all of a sudden you're hindered by the fear of making a mistake, that's a turnoff for a lot of people. Because all of a sudden you made a mistake in a church, and the word the church preaches ultimately is the most important thing, or should be the most important thing in our lives. So when you feel like you've made a mistake, or maybe you cause a distraction from someone hearing the word, if that is, I don't want to say punished, but emphasized, it causes people to not want to continue serving.
I'm just kind of curious. You can just nod or no. It's okay. You can have an opinion. But is that something that you feel from church leadership? Like if you were to have an opportunity that there's a perfection that is kind of hard to understand, whatever the bar is, do you feel that as you try to serve sometimes? Is that something that we could do better?
A few nods.
Okay.
Please disagree with me though if you want.
Mm-hmm. You got number 2.
Oh boy, number 2. What was number 2? What was your question one more time?
Just how are we missing the mark in terms of engaging you guys? I mean, this is one of the things that I remember a pastor once telling me, Mike, part of the reason why we have to serve the people who are in front of us. And so if a younger generation isn't in front, then very quickly they can move out of the consciousness, and then you become somebody else's grandkid or kid. But the church doesn't have as direct a relationship with you. So sometimes we can miss the mark and then just forget, and then we get lost doing things. So how did that culture come that we have missed engaging, especially you single adults? What could we do different? How would we engage better?
You bought me enough time. I remembered it.
Okay, good.
I think as a broad idea, just assumptions about what this generation wants and needs. You mentioned single adults there at the end, and that brought a new idea of, I think the church puts a lot of emphasis on being single as being a calling. Like, it almost gives you more time, or it, we'll go with that. It allows you to do more work for the kingdom, we'll go with. And sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. And I think that having more options than that, like maybe being single is a good time to grow yourself. Maybe it's more time to, maybe it's move, maybe it's something else. Like the church, being single in the church doesn't always mean that the best way to serve God is directly in the church. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's growing yourself for another opportunity to better serve later. And in another aspect, the church, I feel like, does make assumptions about what this generation wants. I'm not just talking about like maybe traditional contemporary worship. I'm talking about maybe how the leaders in the church interact with people, or I don't know. I'm open to hearing your ideas here because I think there's a lot of judgment towards our generation, for being a less Christian generation.
Are you guys sensing that? I know I've read some of that. Have you sensed that, or are you feeling supported generally? Like, no, we're excited about the next generation coming up, or are we afraid of the next generation coming up? Excited? Church is like, we're excited that they're, or a little bit fearful and not sure. Is that what you're sensing? Okay.
There's so many other worries in the world, though, at this point, that I don't know if it's at the top of everyone's mind, but I can at least sense that those worries are there.
Mm-hmm.
And the top of those worries is not the church, most often. It's what's going on. There's so many political issues that we all have our opinions about.
Right.
So who has time for church opinions or church issues?
Right. One of the things that we'd love to do is to say, what do you want to do? How would the church need to change, do you think, to engage your generation? And I'm not just talking about showing up on a Sunday for a worship service. This is something that I really would like to have all of you think about and have an opinion about. Where would you like to serve? Where is the opportunity for you as a younger generation, as an up-and-coming generation? Quite frankly, not, oh, you're those people and we're here. We're all the church. Where would you like to serve? What would you like to do?
And yeah, you mentioned that I'm kind of an AV person at St. Paul's, but I've also helped, like for example, a few weeks ago, there was a babysitting night for parents to just drop off their kids. It was a lot of fun just running around with a bunch of kids in the gym, played some football for a while. Obviously, I had to beat them because...
Oh, of course.
Yeah, 22-year-old cannot lose football to a 5-year-old. But a wide variety of places to serve. And you're not going to find those places unless you try to branch out a little bit or just try different things.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking, I'm just going to say one more thing, and then we're going to wrap up so that we get time for you to visit with sponsors and take a little bit of a stretch break before we eat. But young and single, that can be a challenge for people in the church. Single, even if you're older, I've talked to a number of people who are single. These are some of the challenges that the church has to wrestle with better. And one of the things I want to encourage you to think about is, and you just said it, you know, as a single person, the one thing that you can say is you can say yes to a bunch of other things. And it's only a season of your life where you're going to be able to say yes to those things. So it really is a space for you where you can maximize a level of freedom and try different things and earn the right to have a voice, not just a seat at the table. Aaron has earned a voice at the table. When Aaron has something to say, if he has something that he's thinking about, he's got my ear. He doesn't just have a seat. But your ability to serve in a myriad of different ways and to try different things is huge. And so the single time of life is a good one. And so what I'd really like, again, for you guys to just think about, my email is mikew@awakealive.com. If you want to write it down, you can, or you can find it on the website. But if you have, especially looking for the optimistic part, we are a generation that could, if you would let us. Where are we gatekeeping? Where maybe we've got a reason to, because we messed up some things because nobody dealt with us very well. This is Tyson Walls, who has a pro presenter question. Why don't you take that? He's going to go to work right now, and I'm just going to wrap us up. So Aaron Miller, everybody. Of all the days, of all the times for church to have a computer AV tech problem, 5 o'clock Saturday night with Aaron and I both sitting in this session. That is hilarious. But did you see what I just did? I just handed it to him to go and help a 13-year-old kid help lead worship at a congregation that wants his help? That was not planned. That is a total God thing. But I want you to think about, where are you wanting to serve? If only we would ask you to have a seat at the table and together earn that voice at the table. MikeW@awakealive.com. Talk about it amongst yourselves, but I would love to hear. I want your generation to make a statement to us in the church, because we want you as part of it. Amen? Amen.